Welcome to unit number 17, Trend Starts. Okay, I can't stress enough the importance of this concept, trend starts. So I introduced the trend concept in earlier lessons. I had to start training your eye so that you can separate the trends from just say your arbitrary price action, because at the introduction, it was important that you learn to see trends so that you could eventually break down and distinguish trend intricacy. So you could actually start to be able to break down levels and see the momentum changes, etc., etc. So whenever I started learning trends and trend starts, it was pretty difficult because I didn't understand the difference between a retracement and a trend and trend segments and so on. I guess the question is, why are trend starts so important? And the reason that they're so important is because this is the place where you start seeing trend change direction. And this is in turn going to be the largest profit opportunity that you're going to find in any type of trade, at least in a directional trade. There are the most profitable trades because they generate the biggest price repulsion away from the level. All right, so intuitively, this is what people tend to think. When they see the word trend start, they think that this swing low, they tend to think that that's a trend start, but that's not the case. It's a swing low. Or they'll say swing high, they'll think that that's a trend start, but that's not the case. What it actually is the place where levels of support are gained and lost at the lowest point and untested within the trend. And we're starting to get into a little bit more complicated, in-depth detail, but that's okay. You guys have been studying the basics of the fundamentals, and now we're starting to get into, the things that are going to start really get more technical and the things that you don't find that's regurgitated for free out in the financial world, on the internets and on YouTube, because not a lot of people are aware and understand this concept. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start labeling some levels. I'm going to find, and again, I'm on the weekly, so it's not perfect, but I know that there's a significant level here. And then I know that I gained support. I know that I went higher and I never really came back to test this significant level. I can see there's 1, 2, 3 swing points where it was resistance. So I know this is probably going to be an important level. And then the same thing up here. I'm finding that last weekly that I got above. This area here should be an important level. This is I know that I'm starting a trend down. I'm losing support. So I know that this is going to be the swing high. This should be where my trend start forms on the way up. And my trend start should form on the way down. Because these are my first and last levels that I gained and lost within the limits of this trend. Okay? So that's what I'm doing. I'm scanning for those levels. Just remember, it's not valid until I get above this point. So this is something that's in the text you would have to read. It's something that I've figured out. It's something I've learned, that you must get above this point that brought you down to your swing low. You must get above it. That swing up that took you down, you must get above it before it becomes valid, and vice versa here. So here's your swing point that took you up. You must get below that, which we did, for this to be valid. Okay, so that has happened. I'll leave it there, and we're just going to hit the play button. And we are looking for a test of the trend start. Okay, there's our test right here. Close enough. I'm going to say that's a test. So this was your trend start, first test. Boom. So now what you should look for is a move and work your way back down to this trend start. And I'm not exactly sure where it tests, but it should. Now keep in mind, this is your most profitable trade. So keep in mind, we had a swing high, we lost support, we tested it. This is the 992 level, and we're looking for a level around 690. So, that's 300 and some odd points. That's a really big move. This is a weekly time frame. Just wanted to give you an example of how important and how much profit can be made in these moves. Now keep in mind, it has to be the level that is last tested. We gained this large weekly level of resistance. We went higher to create our trend up, and we never really came back to test this. So I know we haven't got into gaining and losing levels. That's going to be the next lesson. So this will make more sense. You'll probably have to backtrack, but it'll start making sense when you see this, because I want you to sort of understand the idea of the most important level first, and then I'm going to show you gaining and losing within it. It's really the same thing. It's just the significance of the specific level, which is the trend start, that first or last level gained. So I know it might not make sense. So when you skip ahead to the next level or the next lesson and you come back, it'll make more sense. So I would recommend you bounce back and forth as you start seeing how these things get used together. So I'm a little out of order, but that's okay. All right, so we're gonna hit the play button again, and we should come down and test our trend start here as we work our way down. All right, there it is. There is your test. There is your test. So that, my friends, is trend start to trend start. That is, or leg start to leg start, however you want to call it, whatever makes more sense to you. That is the premise. That is the highest trade. That right there, unleveraged, was 300 points. Essentially 300 points that you could have made in gold had you been trading at this time. Use the examples in the text version. Now keep in mind, these are going to look different on all of your time frames. You're going to have trend starts within trend starts, obviously. So there's segmentation happening. I just gave you an easy example that I found to show you, a clear example of trend start to trend start. We'll do one more that jumps to my mind that a lot of the crypto guys are aware of. I'm going to switch to, this should be a daily, I think. Weekly, you can see it as well. Same idea with Bitcoin. I'm just going to mark it out for you. You can mark it however you like. Here's our swing to the low. We have to get above this high. And I'll just mark that real quick. You need to get above that high, which they did. In doing so, which we can already see what happened, but we'll just pretend like we didn't see it. So here's our last support that we gained on the way up. So this will become trend start, just as this is our last level of support. You can look to your left. You can see, let me just move this over. You guys can see how there is confluence, which is something we haven't really talked about yet, but it has been a level of resistance. So this level here is going to become support. The next test, trend start. This is the start of that move higher. It is not the swing low, so keep that in mind. I'll mark this swing low. Can't type today. Swing low. Not the same thing. Swing high. Make this so you can see it. So these are not the same thing. Swing low and swing high. Get that in your head. They're not the same thing as a trend start. The trend start is the first place that you gain support in the move higher. So here's your trend higher. Okay, this white dotted line. You got to get above the yellow line, which is the move that produced the low. So we gained that. And the lowest place where we had also gained becomes the trend start, which is this green level, which you can see to the left here, where I showed you this confluence. We're gaining support as we pushed higher here. We come back down, make a low or a swing low, continue higher. So we've essentially created a trend start here. The same thing happens here. You produce a high, you make a swing high. We're coming down. This is going to effectively become the trend start because it is our highest level of support that we managed to get above, and then we lose. So let's just play it out. We already know what happens, but that's okay. And then play this. Okay, there's our test. So I'll just mark that. There's your test. And keep in mind that was 17,000, and Bitcoin we're going to 63, the first place where you have a trend start. And there's your test. And we should end up getting a nice bounce off of it. We'll just play that. So you can see there's your biggest trade. And I think this will ends up stopping somewhere around here, which is that last level we lost. But that's not important. We'll get into all of that in the next lesson. Probably use some similar examples, but that's the idea. Trend start to trend start. So you notice it's not necessarily the highest point, not the swing low. It can be in some cases, but it doesn't have to be. Typically, it's going to be the first place that you gain or lose. So here's the first support level that you gained in the trend higher, and this is the first support level that you lost in the trend lower. So your test of your trend start, and it doesn't have to be immediately. You don't have to always wait. You just need to take that trade, or you should look to take that trade when it happens the first time. So there's your test. Okay, we had lost support here. So remember, keep in mind this section here, that trend there, that swing up, that's what you had to lose. Got below it. Here's our first test of it since that happened. So that is the idea of trading trend starts. Read the course. You're going to see more on that. It is the most profitable trade that I'm aware of when it comes to terms of just directional trading and chart reading. You need to spend a lot of time understanding this concept because as you get smaller and smaller time frames and as we progress into the course, I'll show you more exotic or more detailed examples. This were two easy to understand examples on higher time frames that you guys can see and understand because they're fairly clean and it's not super complicated. And that's what you need to use to start with a foundation because it does get a little more complicated, but essentially it's always going to be the same thing. So just keep that in mind. I hope that video helps you understand trend starts. And I can't stress this enough. Study this on your own. Go back in time and history and find areas that are trend starts and try to figure out and study and understand why their trend starts. And that's where you would practice. And this is where you're going to make the most money in directional trading. Okay?